There is a kind of exhaustion that does not show up in the body first. It shows up in the mind. It is when you lay your head on the pillow, but you are still arguing with the past. It is when your chest tightens over an answer that never came. It is when you replay a conversation. Imagine a different reaction. Think about what you should have said, what you should have done, what you should have prevented. And without realizing it, you begin to suffer not only because of what happened, you begin to suffer because of the illusion that somehow you could have controlled it all. Maybe that is what has been hurting you for longer than you admit. It was not just the loss. It was not just the rejection. It was not just the injustice. It was the silent war against a reality that was never in your hands. A lot of people live like this, trying to control what others feel, trying to control time, trying to control other people's opinions, trying to control the past, trying to control the inevitable. And the result is almost always the same: anxiety, guilt, exhaustion, resentment, and a constant feeling of inner failure. Because when you take responsibility for things that were never yours, life becomes a courtroom, and you live sentencing yourself for not being able to prevent what never depended on you alone. Today, I want to show you a simple truth, but a deeply liberating one. Much of your suffering does not come from life itself. It comes from trying to control what was never under your power. And when you truly understand this, not as a pretty phrase, but as a principle for living, something changes inside you. You stop wasting energy trying to govern the world, and you finally begin to govern yourself. That is one of the hearts of Stoicism. Not becoming hard, not running from pain, not pretending that nothing matters, but learning to distinguish with clarity what depends on you and what does not, because that distinction can give you your peace back. And before we continue, I want to invite you to do something sincere. Write this in the comments. I release what I cannot control. Do not write it impulsively. Write it as a decision. Because sometimes change begins when the mind puts into words what the heart can no longer carry. There is an invisible mistake that emotionally destroys a lot of people. It is confusing influence with control. You can influence a relationship, but you cannot control someone else's heart. You can work hard, but you cannot control every decision made by the people above you. You can take care of your health, but you cannot fully control time. You can raise a child, but you cannot control every choice they will make. You can be honest, loyal, present, and upright, and still be misunderstood. This is one of the hardest pains to accept, doing your best and still having no guarantee of the outcome. Because deep down, the ego wants a contract. It wants to say, if I do the right thing, life owes me peace. If I love well, I will not be abandoned. If I dedicate myself, I will be recognized. If I am good, nothing bad will happen to me. But life does not work that way, and suffering gets worse when you demand predictability from a world that never promised it. Epictetus, one of the great voices of Stoicism, taught something that is still brutally relevant. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. And almost all human disturbance is born when we treat as ours what was never ours to command. Notice how this shows up in real life. Someone disappoints you. The first pain is real, but then comes the second layer. How did I not see it sooner? How did I let this happen? How do I make this person understand what they did to me? How do I go back and fix it? This is where suffering stretches out, not because of the original wound, but because of the mind's resistance to the nature of what happened. Marcus Aurelius, even as emperor, kept reminding himself that human beings suffer far more from the opinions they form about events than from the events themselves. And that does not mean pain is imaginary. It means the mind adds layers of revolt, dramatization, and attachment to what can no longer be changed. You lose something. The mind sees this should not have happened. Reality answers, but it did. And the conflict between those two voices is what wears you down. Seneca said that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality. And sometimes that imagination is not fantasy at all. It is insistence. It is the mind going back to the same place, trying to renegotiate with what is irreversible. And here is an important turning point. Acceptance is not approval. Acceptance is not liking it. Acceptance is not weakness. Acceptance is stopping the argument with reality so that you can act with dignity inside it. That changes everything. Because while you are trying to control the uncontrollable, you will not have the strength to care for what truly depends on you. And what does depend on you? Your interpretation, your posture, your response, your character, your inner discipline, the way you move through pain, the way you use what happened, either to mature or to destroy yourself. Maybe you did not control the abandonment, but you can control what you will do with the loneliness. Maybe you did not control the criticism, but you can control whether you will become a slave to it. Maybe you did not control the loss, but but you can control whether pain will deepen you or embitter you. That is the silent strength of the Stoic. He does not try to rule the world. He trains so the world does not rule him. And that is very different from coldness. Because a cold person shuts down. A lucid person observes. A cold person denies. A lucid person accepts and chooses. A cold person hardens out of fear. A lucid person becomes firm out of awareness. Maybe you spent years believing that peace meant getting everything outside of you into order. But maturity begins when you understand that peace is not controlling circumstances. It is refusing to hand your soul over to them. Think of how many times your mood depended on other people's reactions. A message left unanswered. A different look. A shift in tone. Approval that never came. A broken promise. And without realizing it, you kept placing your emotional stability in the hands of external factors. Unstable factors. Unpredictable factors. Factors that change according to the day. The ego, the fear, and the immaturity of each person. That price is too high. When your peace depends on someone else's behavior, you live emotionally rented out. Never whole, never centered, never free. And most people do not even realize they are trapped in that. They call it love, but it is attachment to control. They call it concern, but it is an inability to accept uncertainty. They call it care, but it is fear of losing influence. They call it responsibility, but they are carrying guilt that was never theirs. A mother, for example, can love a child deeply and still not be able to live in that child's place. A man can give his best in a relationship and still not control the maturity of the other person. A woman can be extremely competent and still not control the fairness of the environment where she works. Some things hurt because they matter, but pain does not mean you have to imprison yourself in the fantasy of control. And I want to insist on this because this part changes lives. You do not need to control everything to be strong. You need to endure clearly what you do not control, without losing yourself in the process. That is a rarer strength, a deeper one, a more adult one. Now let me show you how this suffering settles into everyday life. You're trying to convince someone to value you. You explain, argue, prove, bend over backward, correct yourself, make yourself smaller, try to be more pleasant, more understanding, more patient. Deep down, you are not only seeking connection, you are trying to control the way that person sees you. And that is exhausting, because no performance of yours can force someone to recognize your value. You can be clear, upright, and present, but the lens of the other person belongs to them. The same thing happens with the past. Many people live emotionally trapped in what has already happened, not because they love remembering it, but because inwardly they are still trying to correct it. Maybe you think, if I had chosen differently, if I had noticed sooner, if I had not trusted, if I had been stronger. Those thoughts look like reflection, but many times they are just a form of self-punishment. Of course, learning from the past is wise, but living in it is destructive. The past has one function: to teach, not to imprison. It should illuminate the present, not hijack it. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself like a man constantly training his mind to return to what is essential, to what can be lived now, to the rightness of his own action. That is powerful because it reminds us of something simple. The only place where virtue can be practiced is the present. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, now. And maybe that is one of the reasons you have been feeling so tired. You are trying to solve in thought what can only be walked through in reality. You are trying to undo with emotion what time has already finished. You are trying to control with worry what only life can answer. There is a peace that does not begin when everything goes right. It begins when you stop negotiating with the impossible. And at this point in the video, I want to invite you into something even deeper. Write in the comments, "Today I choose to care for what depends on me." That sentence looks simple, but it contains an inner revolution. Because when you choose to care for what depends on you, you stop being a hostage and become the author of your own posture again. And that shift is quiet, but immense. Let us make this practical. When something slips outside your control, 4 paths usually open before you. The first is to resist mentally and wear yourself out. The second is to numb yourself and pretend you feel nothing. The third is to outsource the blame and live in resentment. The fourth is to accept the fact, feel the impact, and consciously choose your response. Stoicism points toward that fourth path, not because it is easy, but because it is the only one that preserves your dignity. Imagine someone speaks badly about you. You do not control that person's tongue. You do not control the misunderstanding. You do not control their need to reduce others in order to feel bigger. But you do control one decisive thing: not becoming inwardly similar to what wounded you. That is a powerful question to keep. Will what happened to me define only my pain, or also my character. Because not every suffering has to turn into poison, but it becomes poison when it is not processed with awareness. You can go through betrayal and become wiser, more selective, more lucid, or you can go through betrayal and become suspicious of everything, bitter toward everyone, and closed off to life. The event carries weight, but your processing of it decides the direction. Epictetus reminded us that we are not disturbed by events, but by the judgments we make about them. That does not erase pain, but it gives responsibility back to us for the way the mind either cooperates with suffering or stops feeding it. And this is very important. There is unavoidable suffering, and there is manufactured suffering. Unavoidable suffering is loss. It is illness. It is frustration. It is dealing with impermanence. It is discovering limits. Manufactured suffering is spending months feeding mental stories that deepen the wound. It is repeating inwardly, "This ruined my life. I will never get over this. Nothing means anything anymore. I will only be okay when that changes." Do you see the trap? You tie your peace to something external, and in doing so, you hand away your freedom. The immature mind always says, "I will be okay when the world gets organized." The mature mind says, "Even in an imperfect world, I can become ordered within." That is a sentence worth keeping. Even in an imperfect world, I can become ordered within. And if you look honestly at your own life, you may realize that some of your deepest pains were born precisely when you tried to pull certainty out of places where only risk existed. Wanting absolute guarantees in love, wanting universal recognition, wanting immediate justice, wanting permanent stability, wanting no one to change, wanting nothing to end. But life is not made of guarantees. It is made of choices, principles, and crossings. That is why the Stoic does not place his main security in the external world. He places it in character. Because money changes, relationships change, reputation changes, the body changes, circumstances change. But your capacity to act with honor, courage, sobriety, and self-command can be cultivated in any season of life. That does not remove pain, but it stops pain from disfiguring you. And here's a distinction many people need to hear. Letting go of control is not giving up on life. It is giving up the illusion of omnipotence. You still act. You still try. You still take a stand. You still care. You still love. But without the unconscious arrogance of thinking everything will obey your will. There is humility in that. And there is relief too. Because controlling everything is an impossible project, but learning to lead yourself is a possible one. Seneca criticized the way we waste life on distractions, illusions, and empty occupations, instead of using it consciously. And few distractions are as costly as this one, spending your life trying to manage what was never yours. How many people grow old this way, trapped in resentment because they were not recognized, trapped in the trauma of what they could not prevent, trapped in the need for approval, trapped in comparison, trapped in the fear of judgment. Other people's opinions are one of the greatest fields of emotional slavery in human life. You begin by wanting to be understood, then you want to be accepted, then loved, then admired, and before you know it, you are no longer living from your own conscience. You are performing for different audiences, and the cost of that is terrible. Whoever tries to control the image everyone has of them loses contact with their own truth, and there will never be peace there, because there will always be someone who does not like you, does not understand you, does not approve of you, does not recognize you, does not see you, always. So the question is not, how do I make sure no one judges me? The question is, how do I stop handing my peace over to the inevitable judgment of others? That is the adult question. You were not born to manage everyone's mind. You were born to answer for your soul. And that answer demands courage, because sometimes it means accepting that you will be misunderstood for doing what is right. Sometimes it means closing cycles without receiving an apology. Sometimes it means moving forward without the validation you wanted. Sometimes it means maturing without applause. But that is exactly where freedom begins. Freedom is not doing everything you feel. It is refusing to be dragged around by everything that happens. Maybe you are waiting for something outside of you to finally give you permission to rest within. But that permission will not come. You have to claim it. Claim it when you decide to stop trying to change someone who does not want to change. Claim it when you accept that not every loss will be explained. Claim it when you understand that some questions will never be answered. Claim it when you stop demanding predictability from existence. There is a very mature kind of peace that only arrives when you look at reality and say, I do not like this. I would not have chosen this, but I am going to stop fighting the fact that this happened. That sentence is not surrender. It is organized strength. And strangely enough, That is the moment when you regain power. Not the power to alter the past, not the power to bend other people, not the power to stop him, but the real power. The power not to abandon yourself in the middle of chaos. And that is worth everything, because many people lose twice. First, they lose the situation. Then they lose themselves in their reaction to it. They lose the relationship and then lose their dignity, chasing what already ended. They lose an opportunity and then lose their self-worth by concluding they have no value. They lose control of the circumstance and then lose their serenity trying to force an outcome. You do not need to lose yourself just because you lost something. Keep that sentence. You do not need to lose yourself just because you lost something. Now, I want to give you a simple but powerful exercise. When something disturbs you, before reacting, ask yourself, does this depend on me? Or does it merely affect me? Because not everything that affects you depends on you. Someone else's attitude affects you, but it does not depend on you. The economy affects you, but it does not depend on you. The passing of time affects you, but it does not depend on you. An unjust decision affects you, but it does not depend on you. When you separate those two things, the mind becomes clearer. Then comes the second question. Given this, what is the most dignified response available to me right now? Notice the difference. You leave the field of total helplessness and enter the field of possible action. Maybe the dignified response is silence. Maybe it is speaking with firmness. Maybe it is ending something. Maybe it is waiting. Maybe it is starting over. Maybe it is accepting. Maybe it is asking for help. Maybe it is breathing before acting. But there will always be some degree of conscious response available to the person who stops wasting energy, trying to control the impossible. And here is another truth that heals. Maturity is not controlling your emotions. It is refusing to be ruled by them. You will feel anger, sadness, fear, frustration. That is human. The problem is not feeling. The problem is turning every emotion into a command. You feel anger, so you want to attack. You feel fear, so you want to run. You feel emptiness, so you want to humiliate yourself for crumbs. You feel guilt, so you want to punish yourself forever. The Stoic is not a person without emotion. He is someone who creates space between impact and response. That space is freedom, breathing before reacting, observing before concluding, discerning before surrendering to impulse. That is training. That is inner discipline. That is the building of character. And no one does it perfectly. But whoever practices it lives differently. They live lighter, not because life becomes easy, but because they stop carrying unnecessary weight. They live more soberly, because they do not turn every difficulty into an inner storm. They live more whole, because they do not let the external world alone determine the value of their day. Maybe right now there is an area of your life where you are still trying to control what you cannot. Maybe it is a person. Maybe it is an old version of yourself. Maybe it is the need to fix everything immediately. Maybe it is fear of the future. Maybe it is the desire to erase a pain you have not yet walked through. But healing begins when you honestly recognize, this is not in my hands. That sentence hurts the ego, but it frees the soul, because from there you can ask, what is? It is in your hands to choose not to beg for reciprocity. It is in your hands to discipline your attention. It is in your hands to interrupt destructive narratives. It is in your hands to protect your peace from environments that corrode it. It is in your hands to develop the courage to face reality. It is in your hands not to call destiny what is really a failure to decide. This is where philosophy stops being beautiful and becomes practical. Focusing on what is under your control is not a slogan. It is mental hygiene. It is emotional protection. It is direction for living. It is what keeps you from getting sick trying to hold water in your hands. In the end, suffering over what you never could control is a way of insisting on a battle lost from the very beginning. And there is no honor in staying trapped in impossible wars. Honor lies in recognizing the limit, gathering your energy, and returning to center. Returning to center means remembering, I do not control everything, but I answer for myself. I do not choose everything that happens, but I choose how I stand within it. I do not rule the world, but I can learn not to be ruled by it. That is inner freedom. And maybe the greatest sign of maturity is this: when you stop asking, how do I make life obey me? And begin asking, how can I live more wisely within what life is? That question transforms, because life does not ask you to control the wind. It asks you to learn how to adjust the sails. You do not need to defeat every external storm today, but you do need to stop creating unnecessary storms within yourself. Not every pain will leave quickly. Not every wound will heal in the time you wish. Not every injustice will be repaired the way it should be. And still, it is possible to live with clarity, firmness, and growing peace. Not because everything has been solved, but because you have begun to resolve yourself in the face of what you could not resolve, and that changes the face of existence. So as this video ends, I want you to take one question inward. What am I still trying to control that is already costing me too much peace? Maybe the answer will come immediately. Maybe it will not. But when it comes, have the courage to let go. Letting go is not losing. Sometimes, letting go is how you stop losing yourself. If this video spoke to you, share it with someone who is tired of fighting what they cannot control. Leave a like so this message can reach more people who need this clarity. And tell me in the comments which part touched you the most today. If you stay on this path, little by little you will notice something beautiful. Peace is not born when the world finally bows to your will. Peace is born when your mind stops bowing to chaos. And when that happens, you remain human, remain sensitive, remain capable of feeling, but you no longer live at the mercy of everything. You begin to carry something rare within you, a strength that makes no noise, a firmness that does not need to prove anything, a serenity built in the right place within